Lucas, that is an incredible story. Thank you so much for that report. Glad the photo remains. And this is a Fox News alert. We are just moments away from Nikki Haley announcing her exit from the Republican primary contest, setting the stage for Donald J. Trump to become the presumptive Republican nominee for president. And welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Perino. Good morning again.
We got news, right? I'm Bill Hemmer, and good morning. And we await right now the news from Nikki Haley. A well-run campaign.
Yeah.
And a fighter along the way as well. She will drop out of the Republican race after Donald Trump dominated the field on Super Tuesday. This now paves the way for a presidential rematch. Donald Trump versus Joe Biden in 2024. Trump winning 14 out of 15 states last night. He did not win in Vermont. He now has 995 delegates to Haley's 89. That puts him about 220 shy of the number needed, which is 1,215 to clinch the nomination. That could happen March 19th, 2 weeks from yesterday, Dana.
Bill, I have been impressed with your arithmetic in the last 48 hours. It is excellent. Fox team coverage all morning long. Jackie Heinrich is at the White House, plus Katie Pavlich and Kayleigh McEnany standing by right here with us here in studio. But first, let's get to Bill Melugin. He's in South Carolina with the Haley campaign as we await this announcement. Bill?
Yeah, Dana, good morning to you. Any minute now, Nikki Haley is expected to take that stage behind me and announce she is dropping out of this race. We're told the speech is going to be quick, about 4 minutes, that she is not going to endorse Donald Trump. She is instead going to urge him to earn the support of the Republicans and independents who currently don't support him right now. But think about how far we've come with this Haley campaign. When she first announced there were over a dozen Republican candidates in this primary, she started out by polling at about 1%. Well, here we are. Super Tuesday, the day after, she was the last one standing against Donald Trump. And her campaign highlights, the only state that she won was Vermont, but look at what she did in other. Okay, we're getting a 2-minute warning right now, guys. Look at the states that she did well in some of those states getting 30 to 40% of the vote. It wasn't enough to beat Donald Trump, but it is enough to cause Donald Trump serious problems in November if those voters don't come home. So you get the sense from the Haley campaign that before any kind of potential endorsement, they want to see some sort of outreach from Trump to see that Nikki Haley's voters' concerns are being addressed in some way. She's expected to say that she gave voters a serious, legitimate, non-Trump alternative in this primary, but that primary race for her is now coming to an end in less than 2 minutes from now. We'll send it back to you.
Okay, Bill, thank you. Stand by down there in South Carolina. One thing of note, when Ambassador Haley was working for President Trump, she was one of the rare cabinet members who was given a goodbye ceremony in the Oval Office.
Yes.
And their relationship was very strong at that point. And some have suggested it may not be strong again.
I think it could be.
I would dare say it probably will, and there's plenty of time to make that happen.
Also, remember this. One of the things she would say is that she's never lost a race until today. It's a pretty impressive run. I first met her, I believe it was 2010 when she was running for governor. I did a piece for Sean Hannity called Pink Elephants way back in the day. And to watch her rise, right, she was one of the first Tea Party Republicans. The other thing she said at this start of this campaign when there were a dozen candidates, she said, I will get this to a two-person race. And she did.
Yeah. We talked to the Trump team last hour, and we asked Jason Miller whether or not the two have talked. And didn't get a complete answer out of it, but he said, listen, this is a time to celebrate what Donald Trump did last night. And what Trump did in these states is quite phenomenal. You look at big states like California and Texas and North Carolina. It was all red last night.
And here she is.
Here we go.
Good morning. Just over a year ago, I launched my campaign for president. When I began, I said the campaign was grounded in my love for our country. Just last week, my mother, a first-generation immigrant, got to vote for her daughter for president. Only in America. I am filled with the gratitude for the outpouring of support we've received from all across our great country. But the time has now come to suspend my campaign. I said I wanted Americans to have their voices heard. I have done that. I have no regrets. And although I will no longer be a candidate, I will not stop using my voice for the things I believe in. Our national debt will eventually crush our economy. A smaller federal government is not only necessary for our freedom, it is necessary for our survival. The road to socialism is the road to ruin for America. Our Congress is dysfunctional and only getting worse. It is filled with followers, not leaders. Term limits for Washington politicians are needed now more than ever. Our world is on fire because of America's retreat. Standing by our allies in Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan is a moral imperative. But it's also more than that. If we retreat further, there will be more war, not less. As important, while we stand strong for the cause of freedom, we must bind together as Americans. We must turn away from the darkness of hatred and division. I will continue to promote all those values, as is the right of every American. I sought the honor of being your president. But in our great country, being a private citizen is privilege enough in itself. And that's a privilege I very much look forward to enjoying. In all likelihood, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee when our party convention meets in July. I congratulate him and wish him well. I wish anyone well who would be America's president. Our country is too precious to let our differences divide us. I have always been a conservative Republican and always supported the Republican nominee. But on this question, as she did on so many others, Margaret Thatcher provided some good advice when she said, quote, "Never just follow the crowd. Always make up your own mind." It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that. At its best, politics is about bringing people into your cause, not turning them away. And our conservative cause badly needs more people. This is now his time for choosing. I end my campaign with the same words I began it, from the book of Joshua. I direct them to all Americans, but especially to so many of the women and girls out there who put their faith in our campaign. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for God will be with you wherever you go. In this campaign, I have seen our country's greatness. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, America. God bless you.
Age 52, a former governor, two-time governor there in South Carolina, former UN ambassador here in New York. Nikki Haley exits the stage to her right, saying that she will be a private citizen. We'll see how long that stands up. A couple key lines right there. I congratulate Donald Trump. I wish him well. I have never not supported the nominee, and our conservative cause now needs more people.
She also talked about something that she's been talking about since when she first ran for governor and even before that, which is government spending. She says smaller federal government is necessary for our freedom and for our survival. I also thought it was touching that she talked about her mother, who is an immigrant who got to vote for her daughter in a presidential election. That is pretty significant. She also said that it is a privilege to be a citizen of this country, and she wants Americans to bind together.
So if you're thinking at home, and if you've been saying to yourself for months, and you've been talking to your neighbor, and as we said on the 5
Texting
yesterday,
on Saturday.
right? You're at the car wash, you're at the bar, and if somebody turns to you and said, "Is it really Biden and Trump?"
Yes.
You can now say to your friends who are questioning that, it is Biden and it is Trump come November. And Donald Trump's going to try and do something that hasn't been done since 1893. Grover Cleveland is the only U.S. president who has run and won non-consecutive terms as U.S. president. It would be something. And as Britt was mentioning last night, Laura Ingraham, you think about the road that Donald Trump has now taken to get to the point where he is now. If he were to win in November, it would be one of the most dynamic political stories this country's ever seen. One of them, top 3, top 5, we can debate that down the road, and we will not know that outcome now for 7 months and
29
days,
days.
you got it.
There's that arithmetic again. You know I love it. I want to bring in our panel. Kayleigh McEnany is with us and Katie Pavlich. And, of course, you were here with us last night. This news this morning comes forward. And, Katie, what do you make of that speech? I would just also say, if you're going to dismount, to do it with a classy speech that is short and to the point, where she doesn't mess it up with like taking a bunch of questions and she exits the stage. I thought it was a classy way to do it.
Indeed. And as a candidate, Nikki Haley has talked a lot about Joe Biden being a threat to the country, that he needs to resign. She talks about Kamala Harris and the detrimental things that she would do if he were to win a second term, because she believes he was on his way out. She discussed all the issues in her speech that she thinks are a threat to freedom: too much debt, big government, socialism. She said the world is on fire as a result of American weakness on the world stage. Then she said, I'm leaving this race as a private citizen. As a private citizen, like everyone else, she will have to make the choice about which candidate, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, like everybody else, is better suited to handle those problems. And it's been a tough campaign. It was a short primary, really, in the grand scheme of things. And there's a lot of time between now and the convention for some talk and healing and discussion about the issues that Donald Trump has and the suburban voters he does need to bring back into the fold. But when she talks about growing the party, there's a lot of room to do that, especially as Joe Biden continues to lose a lot of this coalition.
Especially if you look, for example, in Texas last night, the Democrats who did not turn out for Biden.
Right.
Kayleigh, your reaction.
Look, Nikki Haley deserves a lot of credit. Nikki Haley is the first Republican woman to ever win a primary. She is arguably the most successful woman to ever run in presidential politics. I think that goes without question. She deserves a lot of credit for that. Look, I would say to her there is a cautionary tale, and that cautionary tale is Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz waited to endorse President Trump until September of 2016. Ted Cruz took the Republican National Convention stage in Quicken Loans Arena. He said, vote your conscience, very similar to kind of the Margaret Thatcher quote she gave there, and he got booed, to which he had to say, I appreciate the enthusiasm of the New York delegation. So I don't think the Ted Cruz playbook's the way to go. I would love to see her give a speech. You know, I've previously said if she's a vice presidential possibility, that ship may have sailed. But to her point yesterday, she said primaries, we get to make a choice. General elections, we are given a choice. Well, the choice now is the chaos and destruction of Joe Biden or the peace and prosperity of Donald Trump.
She was really the first person in the race, I thought, to zero in on Kamala Harris. And she said, you know, we are actually running against her. Shannon Bream, of course, our host of Fox News Sunday, joins us as well. Shannon, your reaction to Nikki Haley's speech?
Well, that line, I wish any American president well, it reminded me of shades of sort of Ron DeSantis when the governor got out and he said, I took a pledge and I will honor it. I mean, Nikki Haley didn't even go that far. She's not giving even the half-hearted endorsement. So we'll have to see. And I think that this is very much about her maintaining or trying to retain whatever power she thinks she has within some wing of the GOP to say, you're going to have to earn it. I do think eventually she'll come along and will give an endorsement. I think that these wounds are very fresh and that is going to take time. But remember, her unfavorables kept ticking up. The more that she went head to head and went after Trump, they kept ticking up, signaling that the base of the party did not want her to be attacking Trump. They didn't, most of them, want to hear what she had to say and going after him, signaling that this GOP, at least the bulk of it, is Trump's party for now. So where she finds her place going forward, we'll have to see. A lot of these folks, though, as we've talked about, who voted for her in the primaries, were not GOP members. So to say that they're going to come home, these were open primaries, the GOP may not have been their home anyway. So there's work to do, but I agree that she could be very helpful in expanding the base he currently has.
Yeah, Katie, we're just talking about, you know, expanding that. And you look at some of the AP polling that came out yesterday as a result of these primary votes. They found among African Americans that Joe Biden gets 66%, which, you know, you're home, you're thinking, wow, that's sizable. But in previous elections, for a Democratic candidate, sometimes that number is greater than 90%.
And President Trump doesn't have to shave off a huge percentage of that. He gets like, what, 5%, and he can beat Joe Biden among African Americans. Also, among Hispanics, Biden's only winning 49%. As Dana pointed out, in Texas, that number is amazing, considering they think that they're just in the bag, especially given this illegal immigration issue. One thing I was looking at last night in terms of the results in Michigan, for example, of the uncommitted vote, 100,000 plus people. You know, we talk about Trump needing to bring more people into the party, but who is Joe Biden going to have to cater to in order to keep his coalition together in a swing state like Michigan? That uncommitted vote there is being led by Democratic Socialist Rashida Tlaib. And the question is, well, why are these voters really mad at Joe Biden? They're mad at him because he's taken the side of an ally in their fight against a terrorist organization that slaughtered thousands of people on October 7th, and they're going to have to defend that. They also have other issues like with the auto workers and the EV mandates and so on and so forth. And when you have the administration trying so hard to dig Biden out of this hole that he has dug himself without a ladder on all of these issues, time is ticking on big things that he can do to change
I would just add to
things
that,
people
not
care
just
about.
Michigan, because it's going to be a battleground state, as we all know, but in Minnesota last night, it appears to be a battleground state also because you're in double digits for people who went there and voted for a non-committed candidate in a Democratic primary.
And in North Carolina, too. And I think one of the most interesting things about the uncommitted line, there was not really an organized effort in many of these states. You had the Democrat Socialists of America, whatever kind of power they have, saying, we endorse uncommitted, but this was really organic in a way perhaps Michigan was a little more organized. Joe Biden definitely has a problem on that flank, but if I'm President Trump, I don't want to just count on that. I want to try to bring in this Nikki Haley voter. This is why I think that vice presidential pick is so important. I would look at, I heard Jason Miller say to you, Virginia is in play, and I think that is right. You see Donald Trump just 4 points behind there. He should consider someone like Governor Glenn Youngkin. A poll just came out from Roanoke College. His favorability sky high in Virginia, over 50% in one poll I saw, where you have Biden and Trump locked in at 35% favorability. Pick a guy who can move a state.
Let me ask Shannon about that. Shannon, this is going to be the longest general election that we've had, that I've been a part of, and I wonder about sort of the next big thing would be a vice presidential pick on his end, maybe some announcements about debates or not, and then the convention. So from your perspective, looking at it from the Fox News Sunday perspective, because you can take a little bit of a longer view, how do we get through the next several months? How does President Trump and President Biden go at each other for this long?
They're going to burn through a lot of cash, which is one of the concerns we're sort of hearing bubbling up from the Trump side of the equation. They know they're going to continue spending millions, if not tens of millions, on his legal fees. And he allegedly was meeting with Elon Musk, trying to bring in some money, looking for other big donors. They've got to replenish what they've spent and be ready for, as you said, probably the longest general election that we've had, certainly in our lifetimes. I would note also that in the polling, some of what you cited there, that there's also been a shift, and it doesn't have to be much, away from key blocks from Biden to Trump under 30. You've seen the White House try to appeal with student loans and those kinds of things, but younger voters are not happy with where they are on what's happening in Gaza. Also, suburban women, there's been a little bit of a shift away from Biden to Trump. That's a place where Nikki Haley could be helpful. She's been the one who's trying to be out there having this conversation about abortion. We need to be, have a heart for women who find themselves in this place and need to find a better way to talk about it. That's the kind of thing she could be helpful with.
Shannon, stand by. I want to get to the White House right now on the North Lawn and check in with Jackie Heinrich and get reaction from what we're hearing from the Biden team now. And Jackie, good morning and welcome to our program. Hello.
Good morning, Bill. We just got a statement from President Biden a few moments ago on Nikki Haley dropping out of the race, and I want to read you part of it. It says, quote, Donald Trump made it clear he doesn't want Nikki Haley's supporters. I want to be clear. There's a place for them in my campaign. I know there's a lot we won't agree on, but on the fundamental issues of preserving American democracy, on standing up for rule of law, on treating each other with decency and dignity and respect, preserving NATO and standing up to America's adversaries, I hope we can find common ground. So that is pretty significant to hear President Biden trying to court the moderates and the independents who voted for Haley, and this is sort of in line with what we expected the Biden campaign take to be. You know, after Super Tuesday, they were paying less attention to results where they showed issues he's facing with uncommitted voters in several states, and they were fixated more on what they see as Trump's inability to expand his base. So now the Biden team is trying to court those voters. They've been pointing for quite a long time to Nikki Haley's performance in some of these early primary states. taking 19% of the vote in Iowa, 43% in New Hampshire, 40% in South Carolina, 27% in Michigan, and then her win in Vermont last night. And the Biden team has been relishing in polls that show 1 in 3 Republican primary voters believe that a Trump criminal conviction would make him unfit for office. Their takeaway here is they've been excited by how all of this anti-Trump feeling within the Republican Party has hobbled the former president's fundraising, and they point the Biden team to weak Trump staffing in infrastructure in the battleground states that he would need to win. The Biden team says it comes down to Trump's extreme and unpopular agenda. They consistently point to reproductive rights, and they issued a statement last night over Super Tuesday calling him a dangerous and unpopular candidate with a significant liability in key voting blocks that would block his path to 270. So we are awaiting any more reaction, but this was pretty fast to come from the president directly, a statement from the president issued through his campaign. And one more note, Haley dropping out of the race does take away an obstacle that the Biden team has been facing, because for several months, a challenge for them was 3/4 of undecided voters did not believe that Trump would be the eventual nominee. So now we can expect the Biden team to ramp up their messaging about what is at stake. And one more thing I'd like to note, the Biden team strategy has not been courting Republican voters, moderate voters, disaffected Trump voters. They see their path to success through pockets of Democrats who didn't come to the polls in 2020, but were mobilized and activated to vote against the Republican agenda in the midterms and then the state and local elections last year. So this statement does appear to be one of the first efforts to sort of court the center, or the center right, rather, because that has not been a constituency that has been a priority for the Biden team in what they see as their path to victory. Bill.
Hang with us here. I got a question. Dana's got one as well. Any public events today as he preps for the State of the Union address tomorrow night? And yesterday there was word that the president will travel to Georgia sometime before next Tuesday. President Trump plans to be there as well. What more do we know about that showdown?
We have no public events for the president today. There's nothing on his schedule. We do have a briefing, though, with Karine Jean-Pierre, and we can expect there's probably significant work going into the State of the Union. We don't yet know what the tone is going to be in terms of whether he'll make any personal attacks on Trump, because that has been another piece of the strategy that he's been ratcheting up, painting Trump as a loser, pointing to his efforts to overturn the election and cling to power. Biden always going back to that talking point that he's the only one who has beat Trump. So we know he's going to hit that messaging on the campaign trail, and likely in Georgia when Trump is also there. That's part of the Sun Belt path, one of the 2 paths to victory that their data, the Biden team's data, has mapped out as a possible path to victory for them. Don't know if we're going to hear that in the State of the Union, though. We're likely going to hear more of an agenda comparison that focuses on what the Republican voters have rejected, according to the Biden team, hearkening back to the midterms, things like restrictive abortion policies and threats of a nationwide abortion ban, Republican support for IVF, and discontent about that ruling that we saw. So waiting on any more detail there. Hopefully we'll get it out of the briefing, Bill.
Okay, Jackie, thank you. You answered Dana's question, by
Yes.
the way. So
Fulsome answer. Fulsome answer.
Yeah, well done.
And so, but let me follow it up with something that I believe I asked you Monday about President Biden taking a pass on actually coming out at moments where he could get a lot of attention and viewers. So Super Bowl was one of them. Last night was another one of them. Today's another one of them, right? I understand they want to preserve it before the State of the Union, but Jackie said this is actually pretty interesting. Biden could turn on a dime so quickly. It's not him. Yeah. It's the campaign, which is fine. A lot of presidents do that. Of course, you rely on your campaign to do things and do things quickly. But you had on Saturday Night Live, open up with making fun of the Biden team for suggesting that Biden is full of vigor behind the scenes, whereas 86% of Americans are saying they think he is too old to be president. And I wonder about this raising of expectations for the State of the Union tomorrow night.
Yeah, look, he has to have a good performance. He has to flip the script. But how do you flip the script on something that is immutable? Age is immutable. You can't change it. He's taking a pass on big events. He will likely, I surmise, take a pass on presidential debates. So it leaves the State of the Union as his biggest audience.
That would just be, it's pretty unbelievable to imagine you wouldn't have presidential debates. Do you think we won't have presidential debate?
I think that Donald Trump will challenge him to
Yes, he
that,
should.
but I think that Democrats have made this calculation that is riskier to put Joe Biden out there
Wow.
rather than. I also think that they are more confident in their voting machine systems, right? So Democrats are the Olympians of early and mail-in voting. That's why they do very well in Virginia. That's why they do very well in Pennsylvania. Republicans have a lot of catching up to do, so they feel like they have the machinery and infrastructure in place to win elections early, and therefore they don't have to risk putting Joe Biden out there as much as they, we think he should be
Interesting.
because of the gaffes that he does.
Two observations on this. You said yesterday, you said, if I were Donald Trump, I'd challenge Joe Biden to 4 debates.
Yeah.
And then I said, and he won't accept those. So you move closer to September and you say, okay, I'll cut it in half. Let's do 2 debates. That way you keep the issue out there. But if they don't happen, and you're
think that would be
suggesting they
terrible.
won't, but if
It would be.
if they do not happen, does that make your selection of the vice president less important? Meaning you don't go for someone who's going to have one night on the national stage with 60 million people watching him or her perform head to head. And what you do is what George Bush did. And he chose Dick Cheney and explained why.
Right.
And Dick Cheney was quiet. It was a surprise choice. But Bush felt like he had a relationship with him that he did not have with others. Now, you could argue that Joe Biden never had that relationship with Kamala
Well,
Harris.
I
So then that brings us to the question, what does Trump do as a VP?
I think that the other thing, though, is that what President Bush was looking for, and he writes about this in Decision Points, was somebody that he could work with as a vice president, that he could get the counsel from there. He wasn't looking for somebody who would get him a certain type of voter. And I
Agreed.
think that's
Agreed.
a
That's the
foolhardy
point.
way to do
Agreed.
it. So who do you go for in terms of governance and also somebody that you think could carry on?
In a relationship.
Because what did President Biden do? He painted himself into a corner by choosing Kamala Harris, who is actually even more unpopular than he is.
Yes, and if you look at the opportunities that Trump will have to say, come to me, I will unite the country, what opportunities does he have on a national stage? He had last night, if there are no presidential debates, he will have the convention, and then he will have his vice presidential pick. That leaves 2 opportunities to communicate on a huge stage to the public what his priorities are. That's why I think the VP pick has to come from one of 3 people. Tim Scott, who has a very optimistic, uplifting message, speaks in a different way than Trump, but can bring in new voters. Glenn Youngkin, I've already cited the Virginia polling. He can bring in a state. And Nikki Haley. Look, I know this about Trump. He is someone who appreciates winners. He's someone who appreciates
Fighters.
fight. He's someone who appreciates vigor. And he knows Nikki Haley is a fighter. He has seen that on a presidential stage, and I wouldn't underestimate his ability to bury the hatchet and say, hey, maybe.
Could be right. You could be right. I know within Trump's circle that a lot of people are talking about Ben Carson. And his name comes up a lot, Katie.
There's a long list. We aren't quite sure who it's going to be. There's a long list of contenders, people who are trying very hard to get on the list or stay on the list at the top of the list. They haven't revealed exactly what they're looking for in terms of gaining a state, whether they're going to play this out in 50 states, New York maybe. Lee Stefanik has been batted around as a potential. But the VP is also going to be going up against Kamala Harris. And they don't want Joe Biden to be on stage with Donald Trump. They also want to have someone who can go up against her in a very strong way.
It would be a
explain
very
she's
strange
next
cycle
in line.
if
right?
you end up with no presidential debates and only a vice presidential debate.
But maybe they
come
won't
on,
do either
America,
one.
We can do better. Hey, we have Matt Gorman,
do better.
Republican strategist, and Philippe Reines, Democratic strategist, and both of them have a lot of campaign experience, and they join us now, and it's great to have you both. Do you want to jump in here on this debate about the debates? And Matt Gorman, let me go to you first.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I've been following what much of you've been saying. I don't see how you can put Joe Biden, the way he currently is, for 90 minutes unfettered with no staff, no holds barred against Donald Trump on a debate stage. Just don't see how you can do it. We saw him after the Her report. I expect what will happen is the Biden team doesn't want to be seen as ducking debates, so they'll throw out something that they know the Trump team won't agree to. You know, instant fact check, something outlandish, and make the Trump team say, no, that's ridiculous, we'll never agree to that. And then they can point and say, we wanted debates, we couldn't do it. But as a staffer, I don't know how you could put Joe Biden out there for 90 minutes. I just don't see it.
Philippe Reigns, are we wrong?
Yes. And
Tell me
listening
why.
to the panel before we came on, I don't even know why Joe Biden is bothering with the election. Apparently, he has no chance. I think it's wrong for a few reasons. The one point that no one has mentioned is that it's Donald Trump who skipped how many primary debates? 6, 7? I don't remember. But he's the one that seems to be afraid to showing up. Joe Biden 4 years ago did really well in the debates. And, you know, I think Joe Biden's going to do well in the State of the Union tomorrow night. He can absolutely handle Donald Trump for 90 minutes, for 2 hours, for 3 hours. This whole thing about his age and health. If everyone wants to make it about that, then fine. They are the same age. They're, what, 2 years apart, 3 years apart? And I would rather be in Donald Trump's, in Joe Biden's body when I'm 81
in that camp,
than
Philippe?
when...
Philippe, are you saying that you think 86% of Americans who think Joe Biden is too old to run for president, that they're wrong?
It's not a matter of wrong. It's a matter you could want to pick whatever you want. The choice is between two people. One is going to be 78, is one going to be 81. It's not like
But you
it's,
admit that
Nikki
they
Haley
do
versus
present differently, right?
I admit that there is a perception that Donald Trump is younger than he is and healthier than he is. People conveniently forget how close he came in terms of his COVID bout. That was incredibly critical. And now, I mean, he's forgetting more words than Joe Biden. He's up to the wrong world war. He keeps saying we're on the verge of World War II. It's a very one-sided thing. So if someone wants to vote on who's taller, fine. On who's older, fine. On who's doing better with the economy, great. I obviously think that the age in and of itself is an issue, but they're the same age. So we're all out of luck.
We have breaking news now from Capitol Hill, and Mitch McConnell has just endorsed Donald Trump for president. Shannon, I'm reading a line here. He says it should come as no surprise that as nominee he will have my support. He says, I look forward to the opportunity of switching from playing defense against the terrible policies the Biden administration has pursued to a sustained offense geared toward making a real difference in improving the lives of the American people. So already, Shannon, Republicans are coming home, and quickly.
It's such a shocker that that would come in this morning. We have heard from a lot of high-profile Republicans, oh, I don't want to get into a primary. I want to wait until we have the nominee. Well, okay, that's where we are today. So we'll see if others flood in. There have been some late entrants recently. Senator John Thune comes to mind, and others who, once they felt like the Trump situation was inevitable, they were going to get in line. To the issue of the vice presidency, remember, we have had people pick a vice president before they were even the nominee. Remember Ted Cruz and Carly Fiorina? Remember that matchup to try to generate excitement about the ticket? I think President Trump is going to be the other way. I think he's really going to drag it out. I wouldn't be surprised if he announced finalists at the RNC, makes them stand on stage and say you're fired, you're picked. I think he's going to want to keep that alive for as long as possible.
Well, there's not going to be that many big events because, as we were just talking about, Matt Gorman, this is a long general election. And we had a fantastic time all working together last night on Super Tuesday. But I don't know of the next big election event where we will do that again until the conventions. And Matt, so tell me how you think that both campaigns will try to keep momentum alive, keep the interest alive as we go forward.
You know, Shannon makes a good point. You have to manufacture these big events that will get eyeballs to it, right? People watch the conventions, but really that's only an hour or two in the summer. People are on vacation. You know, Shannon makes a good point with the VPs. He did that same sort of thing with his Supreme Court nominees. He would finalize it, announce a time, and draw buzz to it. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of manufacturing around that. But look, the State of the Union, you know, the top 20 programs all last year were football games. 21 was the State of the Union. So Biden has a built-in audience. Very anxious to see what he talks about there. But you're right. You have to start to manufacture events here. You can't rely on just simply things on the calendar already.
So just working through this Truth Social post. It's in my inbox. I assume it to be written just a moment ago. Stop me if I'm reading this incorrectly. Donald Trump is saying that Nikki Haley got trounced last night in record-setting fashion, despite the fact that Democrats, for reasons unknown, are allowed to vote in Vermont and various other Republican primaries. He goes on to say that Biden is the enemy. He's destroying our country. Make America great again. And at this point, I hope she stays in the race and fights it out into the end. Not quite sure
like
where
that's old.
I'm not quite sure where that line came from.
Delayed post?
But it's
I'm not sure.
Maybe it's crossing at 10:20 a.m. Back here on the table. Did you have something?
Well, no, you go ahead.
Kayleigh, when you talk about the reunion of Republican leaders, I think we can assume that Ron DeSantis is going to support Donald Trump.
Yes, he.
Question is when. Nikki Haley, likewise. The question is when. In your experience through working with him at the White House, how will that process go? Does he reach out? Does he wait for them to come to Mar-a-Lago?
I would guess that he is going to reach out to Nikki Haley at some point. I would guess. Look, the wounds are fresh, as you noted. Governor DeSantis immediately endorsed President Trump. And what did President Trump do? He said, we're retiring the nickname, let's move forward and unite. I anticipate that he will have that moment with Nikki Haley. I do think that he reaches out eventually. But this Mitch McConnell endorsement, interesting, important, because he represents a different wing of the party than the base. And he realizes what Nikki Haley said today. Nikki Haley said, I'm a conservative Republican. Well, if you're a conservative Republican, you have a binary choice. And about as far as you get from a conservative Republican is President Joe Biden. And Mitch McConnell today recognized he had that choice. He did the right thing. I think Nikki Haley makes that choice. I think it's a choice made easier if Donald Trump reaches out.
Okay, so here's the latest email. Nikki Haley drops out. This is from Donald Trump's team. It was a hard-fought race, but now it's time for us to unite as a party and defeat Joe Biden.
That sounds a little more correct.
I think that's the one I was
I think that's a little more current.
Katie.
I just want to bring in Matt and Philippe on something that we asked Jason Miller about earlier. And this was about the fact that immigration is now the #1 issue in the country, and then followed closely by the economy. And that's for a lot of reasons, right? Because people are seeing things with their eyes and ears and experiencing things in their communities. We talked a lot about deplorables back in 2016. Philippe, listen to MSNBC last night on immigration. Get your reaction on the other side.
If you look at some of these exit polls, I mean, I live in Virginia. Immigration was the #1 issue. I mean, again, these could change in Virginia.
Well, Virginia does have a border with West Virginia. Very contested area.
Build a wall. Like, what?
And, you know, I'm sure, Philippe, you know, I don't know if you live in Virginia or if you're still in the district, but I mean, that kind of reaction is something that you think something like Donald Trump wouldn't be able to exploit?
Well, look, I'm not going to be the token Dem who defends the immigration system. It's a mess. I've said that on this network a couple of times, and it's got to be fixed. What I would say, though, is that it's been a mess for the last 4 presidents, half Republican, half Democrats, including the last president, Donald Trump. So there's a lot of blame and pain to go around. But to answer your question about when is the next gathering part, I mean, think about last week. You had both Biden and Trump at the border. And, you know, that's going to be an example of those kind of events, those kind of stunts where, you know, the networks are going to have plenty to cover. This is going to be unpopular, but there are going to be some trials that are probably going to bring some people together to comment on. And I would say, lastly, you know, on the bringing the party together, I understand the focus on the various people, particularly, you know, what Kayleigh said about the interesting part about Mitch McConnell. But there's something to note here, which is that this is arguably the most set of nominees going back to maybe 1972. I mean, if you think about 2020, Biden had a fight. If you go back to 2016, Hillary had to fight, as did whoever she faced, Donald Trump. And, you know, you go all the way back here, it has been a fait accompli from the first minute. And the point is that there's a whole lot less of consolidating that either has to do in terms of policy or bringing people together. Obviously, it is going to be tied to tick. You have to fight for every vote. But it's a very different dynamic.
Let me get Katie's take on the immigration point.
Yeah, first I would just respond and say that Donald Trump has said he's going to unify the country and the party by his success and that will be his revenge. So just to put that out there, he said that multiple times. In terms of the immigration issue, I'm also a resident of Virginia. I'm also from Arizona. Know this issue pretty well. In Virginia, MS-13, which is an El Salvadorian gang, runs roughshod in parks. In 2022, 5 members of this gang were convicted of murdering a young man and torturing him in a public place. This is a serious issue when it comes to the local budgets that are being blown out after a number of these counties in Northern Virginia in particular have become sanctuary counties. They're now trying to raise taxes on residents to make up the gap. This is a public safety issue, and this is something that Democrats have downplayed for years. It's the reason President Trump won in 2016. And for the media and the people inside the Washington, D.C. bubble to continue laughing this off as if it's just a West Virginia border state issue. It's a fentanyl issue. The list goes on, and it's affecting every place in the country, not just...
That gang, by the way, was highly effective on Long Island, New York.
Correct.
Now, we live in Manhattan, okay? Many of us were not even aware of MS-13 in these communities on Long Island. And when Donald Trump went in the White House during his first term, he went out there and made a point of going to these towns to root out MS-13. And I would argue he was largely successful.
Well, they're coming back, so that's something that shouldn't be ignored.
Bill, if I could jump in.
Please.
You know, I would say the one thing that people outside the bubble have to remember is that it was only weeks ago that the Republican majority in the House refused to pass the most comprehensive immigration law of decades. And, you know, the Republicans want to keep this issue, so you can't say this is all about Democrats.
And
I mean,
Philippe, you know, 9 months prior...
How did they get over the wall that Donald Trump built?
To be fair, 9 months prior, House Republicans passed their own bill, and it sat on the floor of the U.S. Senate. It went nowhere.
So what does that excuse last month? I mean, last month's bill was really giving everyone everything.
Americans didn't want a bill that pays for lawyers for illegal immigrants or allows 5,000 people per day or per week into the country.
Come on.
What Philippe is saying, you're going to hear a lot about tomorrow night. You're going to hear a lot about it tomorrow night in the State of the Union, and we will have coverage for that too.
Philippe, thank you for the commentary on that. But regardless, you know, the president sat on this issue.
It's a horrible issue. It's going horribly.
The president sat on this issue for 3 years, and now it's in just about every large city across America, and it's going to be on the ballot, like it or not, come November. Last comment.
Well, you can imagine I disagree about him sitting on it for 3 years. I would just reiterate that there's a lot of pain and a lot of blame to go back over the... It's just a wicked problem. That doesn't mean we don't all fight to fix it.
No, actually, I'm going to agree with you that he didn't just sit on it. He actively destroyed the immigration policies that were there in 93 executive orders. But I also believe that the Republicans are going to have a challenge to deal with the messaging that you are articulating there, Philippe. That is true indeed. Panel, stick around. Yeah. We are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
He's been a conservative Republican and always supported the Republican nominee. But on this question, as she did on so many others, Margaret Thatcher provided some good advice when she said, quote, "Never just follow the crowd. Always make up your own mind." It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him.
About 40 minutes ago, Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina and former UN ambassador under President Trump, exited the Republican race, suspending her campaign. And that was about 40 minutes ago. And for what's happening next, we've got to bring in Martha MacCallum. She's anchor of the story.
Morning.
You've interviewed Nikki Haley several times. This was sort of an inevitable situation given the Super Tuesday result that we saw last night with President Trump dominating so much. And your thoughts this morning as she suspends?
You know, I agreed with what you said, Dana. It was a short, specific speech. I think obviously there are some wounds to heal before she endorses, but I would expect that she ultimately will. The only other option I can imagine is that there's some sort of third way. But it doesn't sound like that this morning.
Because she said, I've never not supported the nominee.
Absolutely. And I think that to me was what I read in the tea leaves this morning, that seems to be the way that this is going to go. But, you know, she represents a lot of voters across the country who don't want either one of these options. Now, we talked about this a lot last night. What happens? Do both sides sort of just go back to their corners and form united fronts? I think that's probably what's likely at this point, but we'll see. You know, one of the things that strikes me, though, is for Donald Trump, you look at the big picture, this is going to reignite. There are so many Democrats and liberal media commentators, everyone in that entire group, who are going to be so outraged that this has happened again, that will fire up the machine, okay? I mean, the voting machine, the ballot harvesting machine, every mechanism that exists within the current rules of voting is going to be pressed on so hard to prevent this from happening again. So I think, you know, just like we felt in 2016 when that really surprising outcome happened on election night, I think that's the way this will be viewed by a lot of people across the country.
We'll see how leading Republicans, including President Trump, how he reacts to this and how they take it on. It seems to be that they're loosening up the walls of resistance. I think Laura Trump was the first indication
Absolutely.
of that at CPAC 2 weeks ago.
I think they're looking to get their ducks in a row in a way that they weren't in the midterm, and I think that's the machine they're trying to create at the RNC right now for sure.
My thought is you need to tell your voters how you vote in 2024, because in a lot of states, the way people vote is different now, and you just have to accept it. And if you don't want to accept it, change the laws in those states. Now, 2 weeks ago, John Thune gave his endorsement for Donald Trump. Last week, Mitch McConnell said he's going to resign his leadership position. 30 minutes ago, Mitch McConnell endorsed Donald Trump. And a moment ago, so did the House Speaker. Just going to roll this. Mike Johnson.
With Trump about to be the nominee, what are you most looking forward to next year if you're the Speaker? Is it tax? Is it cutting spending? What is your top priority working with Trump if he's president?
Well, we're very happy with the results last night. The race is set now. It will be a rematch, and we like that rematch. And from my perspective, I think President Trump, what his message is resonating with the American people, because this is not an untested theory. We know what President Trump delivered. The first 2 years of his administration, by just 2 years, we had delivered the greatest economy in the history of the world, not just the U.S. And the reason was because we acted upon our core principles that we've always supported as conservatives, as Republicans. We limited the size and scope of government. We cut regulations substantially. Of course, we had historic tax reform and tax cuts, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And in addition to that, he was trying to work through the agencies to change the way Washington works. Now, he got a lot of headwinds. He got a lot of resistance in that first term because he was still feeling it out. He had just arrived in Washington and was trying to figure out why some of those agencies would not follow the agenda. In fact, some of them were working against him. I think he has big plans to change some of that going forward. We're going to be a big part of that. The House Republicans are going to work hand in hand with the new president, the 47th president, which we are convinced will be President Donald Trump, and we are going to turn the catastrophe, the crisis, the decline that we've described this morning completely around, because I believe we'll have Republicans lead in the Senate and the House as well, and you will see our agenda run. We look forward to that day.
So there was a message for Mar-a-Lago in that you've got a friend in me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the message that he is putting out there is going to be very powerful with a lot of conservatives, a lot of Trump supporters, and increasingly independents and people from other parties and groups who have traditionally voted as Democrat as well. And we see it in this fundraising effort that the Trump team put out just moments ago as well. The Washington establishment, it says Nikki's out, you know, basically I need your support. The Washington establishment and Biden's corrupt deep state will try to make it impossible for us to win, so I am asking you to deliver the biggest response in history. And what we saw in the last election in 2020 was that more voters were driven against Trump and ultimately gave Biden the victory in 2020. So the former president, who's going to get a Grover Cleveland opportunity to be the second non-consecutive president, is going to try to fix what was broken in 2020.
Big message on the economy, too, from Speaker Johnson.
100%.
We'll be back on that. Martha, thanks. See you at 3
Great
o'clock.
to see you guys. See you at 3 o'clock.
Great job last night.
Same to you. Okay. Always great team we have.
Thank you. Down to Fulton County, Georgia we go. There's a hearing still underway on the fate of Fani Willis. Will she stay on the case or not? We are back on that case in a moment.
Fox News alert for you now as this day of breaking news continues. Attorney Ashley Merchant is testifying in front of a Georgia Senate committee. The panel is looking into Fulton County DA Fani Willis and her office's alleged misuse of taxpayer dollars during her affair with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade. That continues, and joining us right now is Fox News contributor and civil rights attorney Leo Terrell. What are you paying attention to at this stage in the Fani Willis saga?
This is huge, Dana and Bill, because the Senate is not confined to the rules of court. The judge is confined by a motion, a single motion. Everything's on the table. So all the evidence, all the hearsay, everything that is available as far as information, this Senate committee has the right to hear it and evaluate it. Fannie Willis should be more worried about this hearing, really, than the one that she's having before the judge.
So why were we in court in the first place then, Leo? I mean, what jurisdiction does the Senate have to act in this case?
They have judicial oversight. It's a hearing. This Senate committee bill has judicial oversight over the criminal justice system and over Fannie Willis' office. Why? Misappropriation of funds, the ethical obligations of the district attorney. The state funds these offices, so they have a right to investigate. Again, the trial proceeding is very narrow to disqualify her from a particular case. Everything's on the table. Her career is in jeopardy right now because you see Ashley Merchant testifying to everything, and she's not restricted. This is a very powerful hearing, and their outcome will have political and judicial implications, Bill.
Indeed it will. And thank you, Leo Terrell, as we continue to watch that. That continues today. And Leo, there's so much to talk to you about, and we will have you back. We had an incredible day of news today. Thank you so much.
Oh, by the way, may I quickly say?
Yes.
Going to select as VP, I will tell Percy and no one else.
Okay, well, you know what? Percy appreciates your vote.
That's cute.
Thank you. Thank you, Leo.
Oh, gosh. Thank you, Leo, very much. So we got the news, okay? We're off and running.
Nikki Haley has exited the race. She was in it for about 13 months, but that ended today. Mitch McConnell endorsed Trump during this hour as well. So a lot of news.
Yeah, we don't expect to see the president today. We might see Donald Trump today come out and make a statement. We read a little bit of what he transmitted a short time ago, so stand by for that. In the meantime, you're headed to the Washington State of the Union, and I'm headed to a secret location to be named later.
Where in the world is Bill Hemmer?
I'm going to come back with a story that
can't wait.
I hope is unbelievable. So we'll see how it goes.
All right, Harris Faulkner is up next. Here she is.
Fox News alert, Georgia District Attorney Fani Willis is back under the microscope. Look at this. This is live right now. The Georgia State Senate Special Committee is investigating Fani Willis and is holding a hearing right now. This is what we're watching. Their star witness you recognize. That's the attorney who exposed the extramarital affair that Fani Willis was having with her favorite prosecutor, Nathan Wade. They were working together on the election interference case against former President Trump. Ashley Merchant represents one of former President Trump's co-defendants. And she, again, got this started. She accused Willis and Wade of conflict of interest and revealed a trove of questionable cash payments between them. At this hour, that Georgia Senate committee is digging deep. Fani claims she hired Wade before their relationship began. Witnesses have already gone before a judge and contradicted what the two lovers have testified to under oath about when they met, what they were doing, all the money. We have watched this case go off the rails live in a courtroom. Our Faulkner-focused team now is monitoring the hearing, and we'll keep you updated on what happens. Also developing, what is next for Nikki Haley? She dropped out of the presidential race about an hour ago. Former President Trump's overwhelming Super Tuesday performance opening the door wider for a 2020 rematch in November. I'm Harris Faulkner. You are in the Faulkner Focus. Trump's last opponent standing made her last stand. Haley won only one state. It happened yesterday, Vermont. She also won Washington, D.C. over the weekend, not enough to compete with Trump. Today in her announcement, she did not endorse him.
I sought the honor of being your president. But in our great country, being a private citizen is privilege enough in itself. And that's a privilege I very much look forward to enjoying. In all likelihood, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee when our party convention meets in July. I congratulate him and wish him well. I have always been a conservative Republican and always supported the Republican nominee. But on this question, as she did on so many others, Margaret Thatcher provided some good advice when she said, quote, "Never just follow the crowd."
A big night for former President Trump and President Biden. Both are now about 80% of the way toward winning each of their party's nomination. Polls have shown voters are not excited for a 2020 A recent poll shows 57% of voters don't want to see Biden run again. 53% say they don't want to see Trump run again. But a rematch is likely what we're going to get. Trump, during his speech last night, laser focused on the general election.
He's the worst president in the history of our country. All of the problems that you have today, I don't think you would have had any of them. You'd only have success. We have no choice because November 5th, it's right around the corner, November 5th is going to go down as the single most important day in the history of our country.
And this happened just a few moments ago. Outgoing Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell just gave his endorsement to former President Donald Trump. Someone who knows the former president very well, Kellyanne Conway, is standing by. She's on the mez with me today. I can't wait. And we begin with Fox correspondent Brian Yennis in West Palm Beach, Florida. Oh, so gorgeous. Brian.
Hey, Harris, yes, it is gorgeous out here. Former President Trump, now the presumptive Republican nominee, reacting to Nikki Haley's decision to drop out this morning, also to her decision to not endorse him, at least not yet, and her call for Trump to bring more people into the party. Trump posting this on Truth Social, writing in part, Nikki Haley got trounced last night in record-setting fashion, and I would further like to invite all of the Haley supporters to join the greatest movement in the history of our nation. Biden is the enemy. He is destroying our country. Make America great again. Trump won 14 out of 15 states on Super Tuesday. He now has 995 delegates. The former president could reach the 1,215 delegates needed to officially secure the Republican nomination as early as March 19th. Last night, Trump called for unity.
We have a great Republican Party with tremendous talent. And we want to have unity, and we're going to have unity, and it's going to happen very quickly. And I have been saying lately, success will bring unity to our country.
In an act of unity this morning, Republican Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell endorsed Trump, writing, quote, "It is abundantly clear that former President Trump has earned the requisite support of Republican voters to be our nominee for President of the United States. It should come as no surprise that as nominee, he will have my support." This is now a general election race. New Fox News power rankings have Trump ahead of Biden in a rematch with 251 delegates against Biden's 241 delegates. President Biden and the DNC have $80 million of cash on hand. That's double the money that the Trump campaign and the RNC have. The New York Times is reporting Trump met with billionaire Elon Musk and other wealthy Republican donors here in Palm Beach on Sunday to try to raise more money. Musk posted this morning that he will not be donating to either candidate in the presidential race. And Harris, former President Trump and President Biden will be holding dueling rallies in Georgia this Saturday ahead of the primary there. Harris?
All right. It's on like Donkey Kong. Good to see you, Brian. Thank you. Kellyanne Conway, former counselor to President Trump and Fox News contributor. So you always come with a healthy dose of don't get ahead of yourself. What are you watching for?
I'm watching for the cage match rematch that, despite the fact Americans say they don't want, they actually do want. You know, for 24 straight years without interruption, Harris, this country had a Bush or a Clinton on the presidential national ticket from 1980 to 2004. And again in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. We go to McDonald's and Chick-fil-A in the minivan every night in order number 4. We like to say we're revolutionaries. We want more choice and options and change. But with so much chaos and crisis everywhere we look, at our own southern border, in our communities and neighborhoods, at the gas pump, in the grocery store, in the Middle East, with Iran, with Putin in Ukraine, people are probably going to retreat to what's most comfortable and familiar. What does that mean? It means that right now President Trump has an enormous advantage in all the polls against Joe Biden on the handling of the issues. And the poll questions I love the most that we should keep our eye on between now and November, Harris, are those that mimic the questions we ask ourselves while we're filling out that ballot and mailing it in or going into the ballot box. So the ones that say, who has helped or hurt my family? Who has a vision for the future? Who has a plan for the middle class? Who has the energy and acuity to do the job? Having said that, President Trump needs to do better among what's called the double haters. In 2016, the campaign I ran, if you looked at the 1/5 of voters who did not care for either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump necessarily, he beat her by 40 points in Wisconsin, by 20 points in Michigan. This time, they're kind of tied, and Biden beat him in 2020 among that group. And it all depends on why you dislike each of them. If you dislike Joe Biden because you think he has dementia or he doesn't have the energy for the job, or you're mad about Afghanistan or inflation and anything else. If you don't like Trump's tone, or you don't like Trump's tweets or his Truth Social, watch him. Watch him last night. Watch him in South Carolina, where he doesn't mention Nikki Haley's name, where he's trying to unify the party. In the Fox News poll that was released over the weekend, among independent voters, Harris, they told Fox News pollsters that 20% of them think Joe Biden has mostly succeeded in, quote, unifying the country. 75% of independents told Fox News pollsters they think Joe Biden has mostly failed. There's an opening for Nikki Haley and Donald Trump to come together. The burden's on her, though.
Wow.
The burden is on her, though, to come to the Republican nominee. I hope that this wasn't just a gap year for her between all these highly paid speeches and corporate boardships. I hope she's serious about beating Joe Biden and getting Republican back in the White House. Last point that I haven't heard anybody say except me last night. She's a close personal friend, or was, of Jared and Ivanka's. And it would be great if some kind of peace could be brokered here and she can come back in and endorse the man that she served as UN ambassador.
You are always bringing stuff that we just haven't thought of yet or thought much about until you say it. And what you're saying is she going to set up the race with Trump? Is she going to go back and then finally endorse? And I know you believe it'll happen. That double hater thing, that's really, we'll get more into that. An easy win last night for President Biden yesterday, but more evidence of what could be a problem in the general election. The uncommitted or no preference protest over his handling of the Israel-Hamas war, those non-Biden votes spiking from 2020 in the 7 states where they were on the ballot. In Minnesota, nearly 20% of the vote. North Carolina, more than 10% of the vote. We saw, Kellyanne, what happened in Michigan.
Yes.
Over 100,000 people voted uncommitted. Now, different situations across the country. I don't think this is being talked about enough. It's not just the Arab American Muslim vote mad at the president. It's not just anti-Israel. Why are you supporting Israel and not fighting for people in Gaza? All that. That's a very angry vote.
Yes.
But it's a primary vote. The one that could stick is electric vehicles and all the pressure that they put on automakers in the state of Michigan.
They did, and they literally have nothing to show for it. I think Joe Biden...
Because people don't want them.
They don't want them, and it didn't work out, and it was a big part of not just the Build Back Better nonsense, but also the, quote, Inflation Reduction Act, the Green New Deal, and he still talks about it. They're so focused on electric vehicles, they don't realize that unless people see the fruits of your decisions, where you're spending money that we as a nation don't have on things we didn't ask for and we don't quite need, if people don't see the bridges repaired, the roads running properly, the electric vehicles that everybody wants them, Hertz, Car Rental canceled their whole fleet of it. People aren't, this is not affordable for the average person. Plus, people don't want the hassle. But they went so far into this. I mean, if you got Pete Buttigieg, who's the Secretary of Transportation, watching air traffic control shut down and leaning so far into electric vehicles, people think you have misaligned priorities. I think that Donald Trump, who won Michigan in 2016, first Republican to do it since 1988, can do it again for lots of reasons. And Gretchen Whitmer, the governor, got reelected there just last year by double digits.
All right. Kellyanne Conway, I love it when you come in. Thank you so very much for being in focus in person.
Thanks for having me.
The Georgia District Attorney prosecuting Donald Trump is back in the spotlight. This is live. This is where we started this hour. It's what we're watching. The Georgia State Senate is holding a hearing on Fani Willis's affair with the prosecutor she hired, her favorite guy, Nathan Wade. A judge is deciding if she should be kicked off that case, or both of them for that matter, and what does happen to the case. We'll bring you highlights as we get them. Plus, critics are going after Democrats' response to the U.S. Supreme Court's decision that Colorado cannot kick Donald Trump off a ballot, specifically the primary ballot.
The idea that a state could unilaterally disenfranchise millions of voters across the country, removing from the ballot the choice of candidate from individual people, just defies democracy. And yet the reaction is troubling.
So that was about states doing it, and the ruling from the high court was unanimous. They spoke with one voice, 9-0. No, you can't do that. However, some House Democrats now are pushing to make it at the federal level. Can you take Donald Trump's name off the ballot? They want to push something else. Former U.S. Attorney Brett Tolman in Focus next. Right now, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis and her infamous love affair are the focus of a Georgia State Senate special committee. State senators are digging into Willis's possible misconduct in her prosecution of President Donald Trump in the state election interference case. They're talking with Ashley Merchant, who represents one of the co-defendants of Donald Trump. She's the one that popped the top on this whole case, and now she is going before this committee. Let's watch it live.
Him to verify the accuracy of what you were claiming had happened?
I did not want to say one word that had not been verified.
Because he was the source.
Yes.
He's the guy that was his law partner and his divorce attorney.
Yes.
Who probably knew as well as anybody in the state.
They had been best friends also.
Okay. All right. And so let's pull these up, Senator Dolezal. When did you start? You kept these text messages somehow?
I did. So I actually, Mr. Bradley uses an Android, I believe. And so it was not easy to just download them, and I'm not the most tech savvy person. I also, there's a lot of texts that just went into things that I didn't think I thought would just embarrass people and weren't relevant. So what I did was I screenshotted the texts that I thought were relevant. I tried to use those in court, but the prosecutor kept objecting and saying I was hiding things because I wasn't showing all of my text. So they just kept on and on for days saying I was hiding things, And I explained to them, I let them look through my phone. They scrolled through all my texts.
Who's they?
It was Adam Abadi was the prosecutor.
Okay.
So he just kept saying, you know, that where's the beginning of that text? Where's the thing after that? Where's the other part of that text? These aren't complete. You know, rule of completeness, kept objecting. And I had just screenshotted the texts that I thought were highly relevant, but weren't slanderous, I guess. I don't even know the word. But, you know, there were some that like, you know, that Miss Willis's daughter had failed out. Like things like that. They were just ugly. They didn't need to be admitted.
Oh, yeah, I read that.
I had tried really hard to just screenshot the relevant ones, but they kept saying that I was hiding stuff and I wasn't showing the whole thing. So when they objected to my text coming in the screenshots, they said they wanted the whole text chain, and the judge ordered me to, if I was going to admit the text, to go figure out a way to download all of them. So I bought a program for $20-30 and took 3 hours, and I was very proud of myself for finally figuring out how to do it. But I was able to make a copy of it and then redact our phone numbers. So this actually showed like when they're read, when they're viewed.
What were you, all right, so up there on January 5th at 9:50 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
You're asking, what do you, read the question.
So I'm asking him, do you think it started before she hired him?
You're talking about the affair.
Yes, the affair.
And what's his response?
His response was absolutely. It started when she left the DA's office and was judge in South Fulton. And so, you know, these are things that he had told me, but I was getting ready to file. My filing deadline was the 8th. And as we're doing this, you know, I'm fact checking line by line, basically.
Right. So did you send him a copy of your proposed motion?
I did, and I actually admitted. So at the hearing that we had, I was able to admit the email where I sent him that. So I sent him a copy of the motion that weekend when I wanted him to review it, and then he had a text. He didn't write me back by email, but I submitted my email so that the court could see exactly when I sent it and when he responded, and then he responded that everything looked good. Because I asked, you know, I said, I'm sending you this motion, I need you to look at it, and then he responded that everything looked good in it. Right. He actually told me at first he wanted me to make some changes because I had not included the information about how much money he had received. I had only included the information about how much Wade had received, and you know, I didn't know that it wasn't really highly relevant to my motion, but he was like, oh, that's going to tip them off that I'm talking to you, and he did not want anybody to know that he was talking. He was very concerned about what.
I'm going to let you just read through this chain.
Okay.
All right. We left off up there. Absolutely, it began before it began when she was a judge in South Fulton. When was she a judge in South Fulton?
She became a judge in August of 2019, and I did an open records. I first asked. I first did an open records. And
all right, so they're going back and forth. That was really interesting, actually. We got to see how the original text messages between the divorce attorney for Nathan Wade and also his former law business partner was texting with this attorney for Trump co-defendant, Ashley Merchant. And so now that we get to see when they were opened, what dates they were sent, I mean, it's all out there and easy to understand. Senior correspondent Jonathan Serrie is at the Georgia State Capitol in Atlanta. He's been watching, as we have been, and monitoring since the hearing began. Jonathan, what can you tell us that specifically stands out at this point to you?
Yeah, well, this Senate committee hearing is learning more details about what defense attorney Ashley Merchant says she was able to learn about the romantic relationship between District Attorney Fani Willis and Nathan Wade, her special prosecutor in the Georgia election interference case. Let's listen to some highlights.
He said that they met at a judicial conference before. He was very specific that it was before she became DA, because that was one of the things that he couldn't remember when the judicial conference was, but he knew that it was before she became DA. And he told me, you know, they met at hotels. He would go to her place. And I remember him saying, you need to find her bestie, who they had a falling out. That's the person whose condo it was that they would meet at.
Ashley Merchant is an attorney representing former Trump campaign aide Mike Roman. Roman, who was a co-defendant of the former president, had filed a motion with Merchant to have DA Willis removed from the case. A judge is expected to rule on that by mid-March. Now, the committee chairman today asked Merchant whether she had reason to believe that Willis or Nathan Wade were coordinating with the Biden White House over the course of the Trump investigation. Listen.
Open records for the White House access, and we had records that Ms. Willis and the mayor of Atlanta were at meeting with the vice president.
Fani Willis and Nathan Wade have testified that they did not become romantically involved until after she hired him to help investigate the Trump case in November of 2021. But as you heard from Ashley Merchant's testimony earlier today, the defense is alleging that the romance started much earlier than that. Harris?
So, Jonathan, I just want to get this straight because I've got a former U.S. attorney coming up next, and I want to make sure I have my facts straight. What was the deal with the meeting at the White House? Did you say the Vice President Kamala Harris?
Said that several people were meeting at the White House. Of course, the nature of that meeting was not expressed. It could have been some Democratic event or a social event.
But who was in it?
But the implication that they're trying to get at was that allegedly there may have been some coordination with this case, but they don't have any hard evidence of that at this point because the receipts, and this is something that Ashley Merchant pointed out, that Nathan Wade submitted are very vague. They just mention that he met with White House counsel or met with White House, but doesn't go into any detail as to what the meetings were.
Okay, I got it. Thank you, Jonathan Serrie. Great reporting.
Certainly.
Brett Tolman, former U.S. attorney and former Senate Judiciary Committee counsel. I do want to drill down just a second on the White House meeting and how that comes into play. Is that purely politics, or as a former U.S. attorney, is it something that you look at as information? What?
Well, I will tell you, I think you're right to be asking questions about it. And here's what the public needs to understand. There's really no circumstance for the White House counsel or anyone in the White House to go anywhere near this if their goal is to make sure that it is an objective review of potential criminal activity of an opponent, of a political opponent. If, however, you are coordinating and you're wanting to take down a political opponent, that's temptation that the White House, I think, probably gave into, was to have conversations and look at the 4 different criminal cases. All of them have access, and we're learning that most of them at this point have had conversations with the White House just prior to charges being brought. That's not coincidence, that's coordination.
Yeah. All right, I wanted to hit that because that seems to be a bigger issue now that we're hearing about it in a different venue. A state Senate committee, special committee hearing. And now you get into what you just pointed out, 2 men battling it out. And it takes me back to what Donald Trump said days ago when his U.S. Supreme Court victory happened. 9-0, you can't keep his name off a ballot. No state can do that. What he said was, stop using your high power President Biden of the DOJ, and let's fight this out between the two of us. It's very interesting to put that in the context of, was Nathan Willis, was Fani Wade, was anybody, or excuse me, Nathan Wade and Fani Willis, was anybody on that prosecutorial team, particularly those two lovers, talking with anybody at the White House? So it is interesting. I'll continue to ask the question. All right, real quickly, your top line about what's come out today and when they met and what matters.
Well, I think there's folks that have been saying for some time now, what's the big deal? Why, so what? So they have an affair. Does that really impact the underlying criminal investigation? Here's why it does, Harris, and why it's so important. You have a legitimate inquiry into the ethics of the sitting DA. You have to know whether or not there's a compromise to those ethics, because that brings into question her prosecutorial discretion, whether she was capable of exercising it appropriately. Then when she lies about their affair, now you have a bigger issue. Now you have potential obstruction of justice. Right now, what should be happening in the next few weeks, you should have a criminal investigation opened for obstruction of justice and an ethics investigation for lawyers who are willing to lie in the courtroom.
Brett Tolman, always great to have you. Thank you very much for handling the breaking news
Thanks,
with me.
Harris.
Well, what will we learn about the border and the nation's other crises at tomorrow night's State of the Union address?
I think what you'll see in the State of the Union is a massive effort to shift blame, because that's what Joe Biden seems to be doing most of the time, blaming other people for his own failures.
The stakes are very high for the president, who also faces growing concerns about, according to voters, his age and mental fitness. Congressman Michael McCaul, next.
The Laken-Riley Act, however, will ensure that illegal aliens who committed theft offenses, as Laken's alleged murderer did, cannot be shielded by the lax immigration enforcement policies of the Biden administration. How many more bills named after victims of illegal alien crime must the House consider before Democrats and the Biden administration act to secure our borders and prevent other senseless tragedies like this one?
The bills that name Americans as victims of illegal immigrants. Say their names. While Congress is now working to prevent another tragedy like Laken Riley's murder, the president has yet to utter her name. Republicans are challenging him to do just that tomorrow night at the State of the Union address. But the White House looks like it's dodging.
I do want to always acknowledge and extend our deepest condolences to her family and to her friends and the people who loved her. I don't have anything to share about the president's speech as it relates to that particular question that you have, but we want to always be sure that we lift up the families who have lost their loved ones in that way.
The president's State of the Union address will be the latest one ever delivered. Politico is billing it as seriously high stakes. The Biden team seems to be hoping the speech will reset or neutralize concerns about his mental fitness. However, Brit Hume and our own Fox family thinks that's a pretty big ask.
I've always thought that the age and acuity issue was a ticking time bomb. And one of his challenges on Thursday night, Brett, I think, would be whether he can assuage the concerns of those even within his own party who think and say that he's too old for the job.
Republican Congressman Mike McCaul of Texas chairs the House Foreign Affairs Committee and serves on the House Homeland Security Committee. Great to have you in focus. First of all, tomorrow night, does the president need to say the name of Laken Riley?
He should. He should hit this head on. It was a tragedy what happened. A Venezuelan that came in illegally, got arrested several times, and then raped and killed this beautiful 22-year-old girl, Laken Riley. But I don't think he will, Harris. He's going to want to stay away from that. He'll probably talk about the border. He has to. It's a 90% political issue. And if he fails to address that, he's completely absent, AWOL, from the American crisis that's happening right now.
You know, the suspect that you mentioned in the Laken Riley murder it has something in common with many that we're seeing right now in terms of violent crime, and it is the border as the central point, the illegal crossing, breaking our sovereign law, committing a crime just to get into the country. I don't think, though, the president will go there. I think he'll tout his recent visit to Brownsville, which was fairly empty at the time, but then since we've learned days before his visit, someone on the terrorist watch list had just crossed at that point. I don't remember hearing that reported to the news. To us?
No.
No.
Yeah. Oh, you went to Brownsville. And look, I live in Texas, right? I was chair of Homeland Security. I was a federal prosecutor. I've been down there so many times. Brownsville is not the hot spot. And there's a reason why Biden went there. There's no crisis in Brownsville. It's more in Eagle Pass and the fentanyl's coming in through Arizona. And, you know, you're right, 300 people on the terror watch list, and we don't even know who they are. You know, as your prior guest talked about, ticking time bombs. When I was chair of Homeland, I want to know, tell me about the special interest aliens. Let me know who's on the terror watch list. I want to know who they are, where they're coming from, so we can protect the homeland.
And wouldn't you want to know that before you take the president there? I understand that the numbers have come down primarily, I would say, from all that the governor of your state is doing. The containers, those large cargo containers, the razor wire. I mean, so now they're poking in other areas like Arizona and California. That Texas is saying no and pushing back. And so now the cartels traffic in other areas. So I get that. But the terrorists don't care. They keep coming. I guess they're willing to crawl through the razor wire. But to take a president there, who are you taking tomorrow night to the State of the Union?
Well, I'm taking the Christy Shamblin, whose daughter, Nicole G, was killed by a suicide bomber at Abbey Gate in Afghanistan. As you know, I am conducting a thorough investigation as to what happened in Afghanistan. In fact, I'm going to have the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, and the CENTCOM commander, General McKenzie, testify before my committee this month. We want to get to the bottom of what happened. We want to know why the suicide bomber got there and killed 13 servicemen and women and 140 Afghans on that fateful day. And it's a very emotional issue, I can assure you.
Well, and as far as politics go, you wish that this president could bring that up, too, because that was the first time that the nation saw his foreign policy fail miserably.
That's right.
And end up in death.
That's right. That was a turning point here, because after Afghanistan, we saw the Russian Federation going into Ukraine. We saw Chairman Xi in China, Taiwan. Now the Ayatollah is lighting up in Israel.
It did. Congressman, thank you so very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
The Biden campaign is reportedly changing its strategy. A new plan, they think, will make former President Trump, quote, go haywire. Plus, how in the world did we get here?
It feels like the Cookie Monster is responding to us and what we've been saying about shrinkflation. I can't believe I'm having a conversation about the Cookie Monster at the podium.
We can't believe it either. How a Sesame Street character got mixed up in Biden's shrinkflation blame game. The first Fox Power rankings for the general presidential election have former President Trump leading a depressed electorate. Right now, at 251 electoral votes, Biden is 10 votes behind. And right now, the rankings have neither candidate hitting the winning 270 mark. A Fox poll shows 72% of voters believe America is headed in the wrong direction. That's an important number to watch. 60% of voters view both Biden and Trump unfavorably. 18% would support a third-party candidate. 62% of voters say Biden lacks the mental soundness needed to be president. 73% say he's too old to run again. Hillary Clinton is telling voters it's time to move on.
Somebody the other day said to me, Zerlina, well, but you know, Joe Biden's old. I said, you know what? Joe Biden is old. Let's go ahead and accept the reality. Joe Biden is old. So really, pick between your two old ones and figure out how you're going to save our democracy.
Meanwhile, Team Biden is reportedly looking to shift its strategy to fight growing age concerns after another awkward exchange with reporters. That happened yesterday. Let's watch.
I better not start the questions. I'll get in trouble.
What's your message to Super Tuesday? Send you a message for voters. Thank you so much.
Wow, it looked like the camera was frozen. He just wasn't moving. Axios reports President Biden is privately pushing for a more aggressive approach by going for Donald Trump's jugular. A New York Times headline says, amid age concerns, the White House tries a new strategy. Let Joe be Joe. It's reporting President Biden tries to take on worries about a tough race by turning to TikTok influencers, a late-night talk show host, and more give and take with reporters. Fox News contributors now, Jason Chaffetz, Richard Fowler. Great to see you both. First of all, is this strategy going to work, Jason?
No, it's not in President Biden's DNA. If he thinks he's going to take some heavy swings at Donald Trump and try to play that game, the rhetoric game, go for it, Joe, because you're going to get your butt kicked by probably the very best street fighter we've ever seen in Donald Trump. If he thinks that he could go in there and start talking tougher and be more Joe, go for it, because I think it'll fall flat on its face. I think it'll be terribly embarrassing, and it'll be sad to watch.
All right, so I popped up some numbers there, Richard Fowler, and I said this is the one to watch. The electorate isn't happy. They're depressed. Fox polls show 72% of voters believe the country is headed in the wrong direction. I don't know if you just be Joe, let Joe be Joe, if you can fight that.
Well, listen, now that we know that this is going to be a definite rematch between President Biden and former President Trump, it really will be which one do you like most, right, in this contest, right? And after watching the former president's acceptance speech yesterday after winning a lot of Super Tuesday states, and also looking at our own Fox News voter analysis, says 59% of Nikki Haley voters would not vote for the former president, if they had the opportunity. This tells me that this is a jump ball at this particular point. It's going to be who campaigns the best going into the next 8 months.
You know, it's an interesting number. It's also, and I don't know if you got to watch Kellyanne Conway, she led us off this hour, that the challenge for that number is that it was taken a couple of weeks ago, and those people may come home and vote Republican, as often even people on your side of the aisle, they come home to the candidate because they are Democrats. People do that because they are conservatives. So we'll see how many of those votes. We also don't know what Nikki Haley's going to do. If she endorses Trump, that changes the game in that sense. Can we do the Sesame Street thing really quickly? I'm going to ask my team. So the White House came up with this idea, because it's doing everything it can to convince voters that the steep prices that we're all feeling are the fault of corporations and not inflation that this president has had at historical levels during his presidency. President Biden actually referenced a Sesame Street character who has a complaint about shrinkflation. Let's watch.
Some of the small snack companies, you won't and think you won't even notice what they're doing. When they charge you just as much for the same size bag of potato chips, only has a hell of a lot fewer chips in it. I'll tell you who did notice, the Cookie Monster. He pointed out his cookies are getting smaller, paying the same price. I was stunned when I found out that's what actually happened.
I was relieved when he didn't try to say he was in the room. This started when the White House replied to the Cookie Monster's complaint on X on Monday, writing, "C is for consumers getting ripped off. President Biden is calling on companies to put a stop to shrinkflation." KJP, the press secretary, went on to defend Biden's economic policies.
It did not take the Cookie Monster. If anything, it feels like the Cookie Monster is responding to us and what we've been saying about shrinkflation. I can't believe I'm having a conversation about the Cookie Monster at the podium.
Call your president. A Real Clear Politics average shows 57% of voters disapprove of Biden's handling of the economy. Bidenomics is set to become a pivotal issue for the president's re-election push. Reverse order now. Richard.
Well, look, I think this is the problem that the Biden campaign has in this moment. All the economic indicators, right? We see inflation going down. We see all these things going down. But while that is true, what is also true is that the American consumer isn't feeling it. Just this week, the president announced that he would put out an executive action to decrease the cost of late fees for credit cards to $8, and that would top it out, right? And I think there needs to be more of that coming from the White House, but there also has to be a realization that for many American consumers, they aren't feeling the good economic indicators that's happening. Right now, as we speak, the Dow is up almost 200 points. And so it's really important that the president sort of builds this bridge to what is happening in the economy, to how folks are feeling, and he has the next 8 months to do it.
You know, you've been saying that for a while. Just call him. Right? Just
if you
call
have his
him.
number, Harris, I'll call him up. We can call him together. We could three-way call him if you want.
Oh, you know I'll be on the line. I got a lot to say and ask. Jason.
The fundamental problem with what Richard said is that inflation is not coming down. The rate of increase is not going up as much, but it went up and it's going up more.
Yep.
That's the problem. And so the real income to people's wallets, they get it. They understand shrinkflation and they blame Joe Biden, not the Cookie Monster. And they realize that life is more expensive in everything they do. And companies have to make a profit in order to stay in business and hire the people that need to be out there.
So
and
what's
when
interesting,
they try to micromanage those companies and bank fees and everything else, we got a problem.
Yeah, what's interesting is you're talking about the price of everything being higher, even the stuff that's not in a package. So you can't really use the Cookie Monster's shrinkflation argument for other things that are too big to put in a package. All right, great to see you both. Thank you. Great debate. Love it. Outnumbered is after the break.